For 30 years, we were inseparable. Paul Dawson wasn't just my business partner. He was the best man at my wedding, the godfather to my daughter. We built this company, Apex Solutions, from a garage concept to a billion-dollar reality. But money changes everything, doesn't it? The first sign of trouble was the locked door to the server room. The second was the sudden unanimous vote from the board to restructure my role. They tried to strong-arm me, leveraging my illness and my recent family struggles. Paul sat across the mahogany table, calm, cool, and utterly ruthless, handing me a severance package, a corporate execution wrapped in polite legalese. He thought he had me cornered. He thought he had planned every move. What he didn't know was that while he was planning my ouster, I was meticulously planning his exposure. I didn't reach for a lawyer. I reached for the small metal recorder I'd hidden in my pocket. And when I played that recording at the board meeting, the silence wasn't just shock. It was the sound of a dynasty collapsing. If you've ever felt the absolute bone-deep sting of being betrayed by a friend, by someone you trusted with everything, hit that like button and subscribe. These corporate wars are always personal. Tell me your story in the comments. My name is Robert Ashton. I'm 58 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was the co-founder and chief technology officer of Apex Solutions, an IT infrastructure company based here in Seattle. My life was defined by two things: my family and this company. Paul and I started Apex when we were 28, fresh out of Stanford, fueled by nothing but bad coffee, ambition, and the absolute belief that we could beat the giants. We did beat them. We grew up together. Paul was the face, the finance guy. I was the engine, the tech mind. We always ran the company on a handshake and a verbal agreement, 50-50 forever. That handshake, I learned, means nothing when $1 billion is on the line. Our relationship was the foundation of Apex. We didn't just share an office, we shared a life. I was there when Paul met his wife, Sarah. He was there when I lost my first major client and thought the company was finished. We knew each other's weaknesses and strengths intimately. I remember one night, 20 years ago, we were working out of a dusty old warehouse trying to land our first major telecom contract. We hadn't slept in 48 hours. The server stack failed. We didn't panic. Paul brought out 2 warm beers, and we spent the next 6 hours on the floor rerouting cables by flashlight, cracking jokes about how rich we'd be one day. We finished at dawn, shook hands, and knew we could handle anything together. That was the bond. It wasn't just corporate, it was fraternal. Fast forward 25 years, Apex is booming. We have 5,000 employees, headquarters in 3 countries, and our patents are the gold standard. We had transitioned from a partnership to a corporation, but the 50-50 equity split remained, enshrined in the founding documents. I controlled 40% of the voting shares. Paul controlled 40%, and the remaining 20% was spread among early investors in the board. Nothing could change without mutual agreement. Or so I thought. The change in Paul started subtly, about a year ago, coinciding with 2 major shifts in my life. First, I was diagnosed with a serious, though manageable, autoimmune disorder. It required a few months of reduced workload, forcing me to rely on my executive team and, crucially, Paul to handle my operational duties. Second, my youngest daughter, who was studying abroad, faced a sudden personal crisis. I dropped everything, flying overseas to be with her for 3 weeks. When I stepped back, I created a void of vulnerability. Paul, the financial strategist, saw an opportunity, not a need to support his friend. The first signs were bureaucratic. My access code to the main data center was suddenly changed for security upgrades. My weekly financial reports were delayed, then stopped altogether. When I asked Paul about it, he was dismissive, almost condescending. "Rob, buddy, you need to focus on your recovery. We've got the operational stuff under control. Let the VP of security handle the keys. Just rest." The dismissal was more hurtful than a shouting match. It implied I was no longer capable, no longer relevant. The man who had once trusted me to fix a server blindfolded was now treating me like a sick child. I realized something was deeply wrong when my most trusted VP, Maria Rodriguez, called me late one night. She was distraught. "Rob, Paul is calling emergency board meetings. They're discussing replacing you as CTO. He's telling the board you've lost your edge, that your illness makes you a liability." The corporate machine was moving. Paul wasn't trying to help the company. He was executing a hostile takeover of my share. The key to Paul's strategy was controlling the board. The 50% shares were scattered, but Paul had quietly been courting the 3 largest investors, promising them a greater return once the old inefficient management, meaning me, was removed. His plan was to use the combined 60% majority, his 40% plus the board's 20%, to push through a management change that would dilute my role and force me into early retirement, effectively buying my shares at a depressed value. This wasn't just business, it was an act of profound personal treachery. He was leveraging my personal pain, my illness, and my family troubles to seize everything. I needed proof. A feeling wasn't enough. The board dealt in facts and legal recordings. I stopped fighting Paul openly. I became quiet, compliant, and slightly depressed, playing the role of the ailing founder he wanted the board to see. But behind the scenes, I was using my old CTO skills, meticulous, invisible data gathering. I needed Paul to explicitly admit his plan, the coercion, the asset stripping, and the financial promises he made to the board members. I retrieved an old voice-activated digital recorder I hadn't used since the early days, a tiny, powerful device that could fit unnoticed in my suit pocket. I called Paul and asked for a private meeting at his home, away from the office, under the pretense of making peace and discussing severance. I chose his home because board meeting conversations are protected. Private conversations about a fraudulent takeover are not. The day of the meeting, I dressed in a suit that was slightly too big for me, playing up my supposed frailty. I placed the recorder, activated, deep inside the breast pocket, cushioned by my handkerchief. Paul was smug. He offered me a scotch, smiled, and sat down in his leather armchair. "Rob, this is hard for me too, but the company needs fresh vision. The board is unanimous. You've had a great run, but it's time to step aside." I played along, asking questions about the severance, the value of the shares, and the board's decision-making process. I guided the conversation, gently, skillfully, like a prosecutor leading a hostile witness. "So, the board really believes I'm a liability now, Paul? Or is this about clearing the deck for a private sale you've already negotiated?" He laughed, a dry, confident sound. "Rob, you're losing it. Of course the board is on board. We needed the votes. I guaranteed them a 30% jump in stock value after we streamlined the executive team. Look, I'm being generous. Take the offer. It's painless." Then, the critical moment. I asked him directly about the coercion. "Did you tell Thompson, one of the key board members, that I was mentally unfit due to my illness? Did you promise him my CTO shares if you voted against me?" Paul leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, a voice of pure greed. "Rob, it's business. I had to secure the votes. Look, I'm giving you a better package than you deserve. Don't make this messy. You're out. It's done." I thanked him, finished my drink, and walked out. The recording was 2 hours long. The last 20 minutes were pure, unadulterated confirmation of fraudulent manipulation, coercion, and intent to steal my shares. 3 days later was the emergency board meeting. The agenda was simple: motion to approve executive management restructuring. I walked into the room. It was all polished mahogany, glass, and fear. Paul was at the head of the table, flanked by his lawyers and the key board members he had bribed. I was alone, sitting quietly. Paul started the meeting, his voice smooth and empathetic. "Gentlemen, we all love Rob, but his health concerns have necessitated this difficult transition. We have a severance package." He gestured to his lawyer, who slid the documents toward me. This was the moment of my corporate execution. The lawyer began reading the terms, formalizing my ouster. I waited until the word irrevocable was uttered. I raised my hand calmly. "Excuse me, before I sign anything, I just have one final contribution to make to this meeting." Paul smiled thinly, a patronizing look in his eyes. He thought I was going to beg. "Certainly, Rob, go ahead." I reached into my breast pocket, not for a pen, but the tiny metal recorder. I placed it squarely on the mahogany table, right next to the water carafe. The small red light was blinking. I decided to record my final conversation with Paul 3 days ago, just to ensure all the facts were straight for my legal team. I think you all need to hear the actual, unedited rationale behind this unanimous restructuring. I pressed play. The room went instantly silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the rustle of papers, and then Paul's voice, played back through the tinny speaker, filled the silent room. The recording played. Paul, I guaranteed them a 30% jump in stock value after we streamlined the executive team. Look, I'm being generous. Take the offer. It's painless. Then the recording played, for a full minute encapsulating the entire corporate plot and the personal malice. The effect in the room was devastating. Paul's face went from smug confidence to ash-gray horror. He slammed his hand on the table. "Stop that! That's illegal! You can't record me!" The lawyers were instantly on their feet, shouting objection and cease and desist. Thompson, the bribed board member, looked like he was going to vomit. His face was pure white, the realization of his legal exposure slamming into him. The recording proved he had been promised shares in exchange for a vote based on false premises. The uninvolved members' shock was genuine. They thought they were protecting the company from a sick man. They were actually facilitating a hostile coup. I let the chaos rage for a moment, then calmly raised my voice above the din. It is not illegal, Paul. Under Washington state law, an individual may record a private conversation if he or she is a party to the conversation. I am a party. Every word is admissible and verifiable. This recording proves that you have engaged in fraudulent inducement, breach of fiduciary duty, and material misrepresentation to force a corporate restructuring for your personal financial gain. I didn't stop there. I took the floor, addressing the entire board, my voice filled with the controlled emotion of a man reclaiming his honor. Paul called me sick. He called me a liability. But I am not here alone. My legal team has prepared a civil suit naming Paul Dawson and any board member who voted knowingly based on his fraudulent claims as co-defendants. The suit seeks injunctive relief, reversal of all votes taken under false pretense, and the removal of Paul Dawson as CEO and a member of the board. I looked directly at Paul, who was now being quietly ushered out of the room by his frantic lawyers. You didn't just try to steal my company, Paul. You tried to steal my life, and you did it by leveraging our 30 years of friendship. That's unforgivable. The ensuing corporate fallout was swift and total. The lawsuit was filed the next morning. The recording was the corporate death certificate. The board, terrified of their own liability, immediately voted to suspend Paul and launch an internal investigation. Within a month, he was forced to resign all positions and liquidate his shares back to the company at a severely reduced valuation. Thompson and the other complicit board members were quietly forced out. I returned as CTO, but the victory was bittersweet. The company was saved, but the man I thought of as my brother was gone. I remember seeing Paul one last time, months later, outside the courthouse. He was smaller, his suit ill-fitting. He tried to speak. "Rob, I'm sorry. The pressure, the numbers." I cut him off. "You didn't betray me because of numbers, Paul. You betrayed me because you thought I was weak and you got greedy. You destroyed something we built with 30 years of trust. That's the part that costs you more than your shares." I walked away. There was no closure in that moment, only a profound sense of loss. It's been 2 years since the boardroom collapse. Apex Solutions is stronger now, guided by new ethical leadership. I'm back in my CTO role, but I delegate more, mindful of my health. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about law or technology. It was about the fragility of human bonds when faced with exponential wealth. Paul and I were partners in everything, except our moral compasses. I still have the recording. I keep it locked away. I don't listen to it anymore, but it serves as a powerful, cold reminder. Trust is not a founding document. It is not an asset. It is a daily decision. And when someone chooses to break it, you have to be ready to use the truth, even the painful recorded truth, to reclaim your dignity and your legacy. I lost a friend, but I saved my company, my reputation, and my self-respect. And that, in the corporate war, is the ultimate victory. If you've ever had to face down a betrayal that cut you to the core, you know that saving your soul is more important than saving your bank account. The truth, recorded or spoken, is the only weapon that can truly defeat greed. If you connected with the high cost of this corporate betrayal, share this story. And remember, always document, because when trust dies, only the hard facts can bring justice. Thank you for letting me share this painful chapter. Take care.